Right, so I will start by welcoming our guest. Thank you for coming and talking to us. Kelly is a PhD researcher at Maastricht University. Her expertise lies in 3D scholarship, heritage visualization, digitization, 3D narratives, and digital humanities. Her PhD dissertation is titled Three-Dimensional Scholarly Publishing and the Future of Sustainable 3D Research. And it examines the relationship of the main points of online 3D publishing, which are the 3D editor, 3D viewer, and digital infrastructure. And with that, we come to the PURE3D project, which addresses the infrastructure concerns. Share your screen if you want, but I probably have to first make you co-host.
Okay. Okay, let me. Are you seeing like my presenter view or are you seeing?
It's the presenter view, yes.
Do you know how I don't do that? Wait, let me see if I can share.
I think you have to switch something somewhere.
Yeah. And what about now?
Yes,
now it's good.
Perfect.
Good. Okay,
Great.
great. Thank you. Okay. Oops. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Gillikin-Schoueri, and Louise, as we said, I'm a PhD candidate and researcher at Maastricht University, and I will be presenting on the outcomes of the PURE3D project, which is a 4-year endeavor that was led by Kostas Papadopoulos and Susan Schreibman here at Maastricht, and it recently concluded this past December. But yeah, before I begin, I'd like to thank Louise for inviting me to give the talk. We had the great pleasure to work with Louise on her 3D edition. She and some of the other participants were very patient guinea pigs in our earlier kind of in-person training program, and their insights and the final editions that they created had helped us greatly to improve our approach, both for the mentoring of others on how to conceptualize, what is a 3D edition, but also their experiences helped inform our development of the infrastructure itself. So yeah, I will lay out the presentation outline. So first I'll talk about PURE3D and then the development of the infrastructure kind of briefly. I'm not like a coder or a developer, so I don't have that much technical expertise on the ins and outs of it. But then what I am more of an expert on is the 3D edition creation workflow. So I can kind of tell a little bit about the infrastructure by means of that workflow. So from getting access to the authoring side of the PURE3D infrastructure up until the final publication on the front-facing website. And then after the presentation portion, I thought it would be nice for you guys to explore some of the 3D editions yourselves on PURE3D. And then after that, a little exercise in Miro board, we can have a discussion on your impressions of Voyager and kind of our integration of Voyager into PURE3D as an infrastructure, as well as its suitability for publishing in kind of this format. And with that, I will start part 1, PURE3D. But before I actually get into PURE3D, first I want to pose the question, why is now the time to rethink 3D in the context of scholarly outputs? So at the time where atypical forms of scholarship are being discussed in the context of reform assessment, recognition, rewards, it's critical to restart conversations about what it takes to publish 3D, what systems, mechanisms, and support structures should be in place that will ultimately lead to more sustainable publishing of 3D scholarship that could in turn lead to a broader recognition of 3D as scholarship in its own right, and not just as an aside to a published article in print form. However, there's also another reason why 3D should be dealt with right now, and that is because we are at a very pivotal moment for 3D scholarship. Currently, there's a great hype for virtual reality and the metaverse, and this is bringing 3D graphics to the fore. Also, there's a renewed interest that has been quite evident in heritage research and dissemination, with several projects problematizing issues of sustainability, standards, quality, intellectual transparency, and infrastructure. And most importantly, the European Commission is currently investing over 100 million euros in 3D-focused cultural heritage initiatives and the development of pan-European infrastructures, including a common European data space, so Europeana, and a collaborative cloud. At the same time, through campaigns such as the recent TwinIt, member states are encouraged to 3D digitize their cultural heritage. So alongside this increasing 3D digitization by museums, the next 5 years will be really critical for 3D scholarship because the volume of online 3D visualizations will surpass the total produced over the last 4 decades of 3D heritage visualization. So that brings me back to PURE3D. So PURE3D was started with the objective of contributing to these conversations and the movement happening around 3D publication. The PURE3D project is a 4-year project that concluded recently. It was funded by the Dutch Platform for Digital Infrastructure, the Social Sciences and Humanities. It's a one-off funding instrument aimed at supporting existing infrastructure developments in the Netherlands. And PURE3D started in 2021 and it finished in December 2025. The project goals were to develop an infrastructure for authoring and viewing 3D scholarly editions, provide a system and tools for depositing these 3D editions, including their files associated, and doing this under kind of FAIR principles. And ultimately, what we wanted to do was provide a conceptual and methodological framework for recognizing and rewarding interactive 3D scholarship. So our core project team comes from Maastricht University. This includes myself, Kostas Papadopoulos, and Susan Schreibman. And then we were joined by the Humanities Cluster at the National Academy in the Netherlands. And they're in charge of the hosting and developing of the infrastructure. So they're the tech people. And then also the Data Archiving and Network Services, so DANS, has been responsible for guiding our metadata standards and developing guidelines for FAIR 3D data. In addition to PURE3D, we kind of got funding to do a sister project, which is Opera3D. It was funded by the Dutch National Agency, the NVO, and the goal of this project was to explore if and how PURE3D can be turned into a publication infrastructure and with a publication and peer review workflow for 3D scholarly editions. And this was kind of with the goal of potentially collaborating with academic publishers. So the kind of description of Opera is to provide a trusted and robust peer-reviewed publishing solution for 3D scholarship. The project addresses 4 communities. So the first are academics who are currently unable to have their publications valued. Their publications who produce in 3D, as well as scholars and students who wish to use these quality-assured 3D publications for their research and learning. The third is publishers who are interested in adding peer-reviewed 3D publications to their digital offerings. And the fourth is the public who would like to engage with innovative research in an accessible and engaging format and to be, assured that what they're viewing is robust and scholarly. So first, I'll answer the question, what is a 3D scholarly edition? It's a concept that Susan and Kostas came up with a few years ago. And this the concept is to address or counteract the double publication phenomenon. Double publication in this sense means that non-traditional scholarship, like digital editions, databases, creative works, or software programs, they also need to be represented in print form in order to get academic recognition, which can lead to tenure, promotion, etc. So they define 3D scholarly edition as an information space that conveys a scholarly argument about an object or space in a single spatio-temporal environment. And in this environment, it's immersive, multivariant, and multisensorial. In such an environment, 3D models become the text of a conventional publication paradigm. This is done by means of contextualization with multimodal annotation and the documentation of metadata and paradata. And it provides users with access to modeling and interpretive choices, as well as the scholarly arguments. And in this way, it creates a multimodal resource impossible to replicate in print form. And by looking at 3D as a form of text, we're permitting to build an intertextual network that provides the potential for linking the editorial, epistemological, and technical processes involved in 3D knowledge production. At the same time, publishing in the form of a 3D edition counteracts the bifurcated nature of 3D scholarship or double publication, where scholarly arguments are published separately from the 3D models themselves, for example, in a journal article in print form. But the technical decisions and processes are like just forgotten. They're not shared with the scholarly community at all. So one of the major goals of PURE3D was to develop this idea of a 3D scholarly edition further. And we started off with a number of pilot projects from a broad range of heritage institutions who contributed to the development of the infrastructure by problematizing how 3D editions might look for different use cases. So these first projects ranged from digitized objects to virtual worlds, and they come from very different fields, including history, archaeology, architecture, art history, or modern arts, and so forth. And they all kind of had very different use cases in mind. So for example, for public consumption or for scholarly audiences. So after these pilot projects were concluded, we had 2 open calls for new projects to be developed as 3D scholarly editions. Louise and 5 others were part of the first call, and their editions are now published on the PURE3D infrastructure alongside the pilot projects as well. So we conducted their training and the mentoring through the edition process in a like both online and in-person workshop. And then for the second call, and sorry, this training kind of took place over I don't know, like 6 or 7 months. And then the second call, we only did training and mentoring online because we had people who were coming from Canada and the US. And this, I would say, like some people are finished and some people are still working on it. So not all of them are published from the second call. Another kind of in addition to the PURE3D related projects, we also have many editions, many, that were developed by students from the Masters in Digital Cultures here at Maastricht University. So Costas and Susan have been teaching this course called Creating Digital Collections for a number of years. And last year, I was also teaching it with them, and we decided on the theme of toys. And the course objective was to digitize a toy using photogrammetry method, and then to create a 3D scholarly edition about that toy by embedding it within socioeconomic and historical contexts, as well as reflecting on their kind of creation process using the theories introduced in the course, namely aura, authenticity, digital materiality, and multimodality. So the students did this as a pair, and they managed to first create a 3D model, their first time ever doing so, and create a 3D edition, having absolutely no idea what it was before they started the course. And they did this all in less than 2 months, which I find very impressive. And the course was very well received last year, and we're currently repeating the theme and the process for this year's student. They're now in the phase of finalizing their 3D models, and it's exciting and stressful at the same time. So with these students and the researchers and museums and public sector professionals from the first 2 calls and the pilot projects, we've helped to support the creation of over 50 editions in the past 4 years. This has been a great learning experience for the individuals, but also for our project, as their kind of experiences with Voyager, with the infrastructure, was a key element for understanding how we should develop that infrastructure. And this was done by understanding what their needs were, what their concerns were with how their data is handled, as well as kind of following what their intellectual processes were for developing a 3D edition. So that concludes the PURE3D section. And now I will discuss a bit about the development of the infrastructure. So a 3D scholarly edition is not just about a 3D model, like a single 3D model online. It has to be written and edited so that the 3D model is contextualized with a 3D scholarly narrative. And to facilitate this for a number of editions and authors, there needs to be an entire ecosystem, so an infrastructure that can accommodate the edition creation process and the publication workflow. It starts with a workspace that will allow the authors of these editions to upload a 3D model and their related materials. They need to view that model in a 3D viewer of, well, their choice, but in the sense, our choice, and contribute annotations. So text-based annotations, multimodality or multimedia, camera views, etc. And then when they save their work, the workspace captures the annotations that have been made in the 3D viewer and then stores them alongside the 3D model, but it needs to be stored in a database backend manager. So our task for developing this infrastructure started with understanding what is the state of 3D scholarship via an environment scan. And we looked at academic literature and gray literature. We reviewed existing infrastructure, and we kind of reviewed and examined different 3D viewing frameworks. We published our findings in a report that can be found on our project website. It's called the PURE3D Technical Report. In addition to gathering these technical requirements, we also conducted an online survey quite early on. And this was kind of to confirm with the literature, so confirm with the 3D research community, with the literature, and to see if we were getting in the same, going in the same direction as what people actually wanted, or not just what academics were saying what they wanted. And the report for that survey is also online on our website. So what are these 3D requirements? So essentially, they boil down to a 3D model, which is in a stable and web-friendly file format. It can be visualized via a robust 3D web viewer. And this viewer is embedded within an Access platform. And this platform should connect 3D metadata and paradata to each 3D record and ensure that all associated files are made findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, so FAIR. And furthermore, it should manage user roles and facilitate the protocols for saving, revising, reviewing, and finally publishing. And it should also look and feel good while it's doing so. So I'm not going to cover all of these different facets in great detail during the presentation, but many of them will be touched upon when I am describing the authoring workflow in the next section. So besides your 3D model, first and foremost, a 3D Scholarly Edition needs to be developed and visualized in a 3D viewing environment. However, the specific requirements for a 3D Scholarly Edition means multimodal contextualization, as well as visualization. Specifications and analytical tools are quite necessary. So it can't just be like something visualizing a 3D and twirling it around. It has to have a bit more features and functionalities. And the most straightforward solution is to, of course, develop our own bespoke viewer that would tick all of the boxes that we kind of imagine. But we didn't really have the time or funds to invest in doing this. We also didn't want to reinvent the wheel because many other projects are doing really good work, kind of trying to tick these boxes. So we instead wanted to adopt an existing framework and try to use it to suit our needs. Furthermore, the problem with bespoke web viewers is that they're not ideal for long-term sustainability. So they need frequent updates and maintenance because, web standards continue to develop. And as they develop, the web viewer frequently breaks, is no longer supported online. So we therefore wanted to seek out something that was ready to use. It was open source, and it had a guarantee for long-term maintenance. And we encountered many good options, but ultimately we chose the Voyager suite of 3D web tools because it really emphasized this kind of text-based contextualization and narratives and storytelling. So that's not to say that Voyager is like the only viewer that can and will be embedded in PURE3D. We envisioned that it could be one 3D viewer for this use case and a different 3D viewer for another use case. But for now, with the time and funds that we had, we could only work on one viewer, and that's Voyager. But yeah, in essence, we would like the alternative viewers because there could be different use cases, or the edition subject matter would require kind of a different environment. So what is Voyager? So Voyager is a web viewing tool for inspection and authoring of 3D assets. The aim of the Voyager system has been to bring the Smithsonian's vast collection of 3D digitized objects to a wider audience by allowing web-based exploration and interaction with their digital surrogates in an immersive and engaging way. For us, Voyager was really attractive because it was open source. They had good documentation, both on how to set up, the instance, as well as how to use it. So how to use it from the author-creator side. We also had really great responsive and friendly communication between the developers and our team. And because it's federally funded through the Smithsonian, it has long-term commitment for maintaining and updating the code. So for example, every month, the developer, he makes a software update, and in the update, there could be fixing for bugs, improving usability, or adding new features. That is to say that with the current situation in the States and a lot of federal funding is getting cut, hopefully this will remain true for years to come. So the Smithsonian Voyager Toolkit consists of two different interfaces. So the first is Explorer. This is the front-end 3D web viewing interface. It's what the end user, the public users are seeing in their experience. And Voyager Story is the authoring interface for adding annotations and creating your tours and articles. And so in Story is where you can add annotation at 3 different levels using the Voyager Story interface. So the first are hotspot annotations. These can be added directly onto the 3D model as like points. And then what you can do, which is nice, is group them into distinct sets. So this can be like based on material aspects of the object, or it can be thematic or whatever you decide. And then these annotations have the option to be linked to longer text called articles. So these articles are sitting actually in an HTML file where multimedia can also be embedded alongside that text. And then the last kind of level of annotation or contextualization is a guided tour, which coordinates camera movements around the 3D model, various settings that you've coded with Story about the 3D model, how it's viewed, if it's being measured, if it's being sliced, if the environment is changing somehow with the lights or the background. So it coordinates all of that stuff happening in the 3D space together with annotations, as well as the articles that are popping up in a specific order. So the tour is a way to bring kind of your linear narrative together so that your end user can follow something that is a bit coherent. But they also have, because of it's also segmented into the annotations and the articles, anybody can come in and get information without having to follow the tour as well. So it's kind of both linear and non-linear at the same time. Another really attractive aspect of the Voyager toolkit is their emphasis on UX and UI for the authoring side of Voyager, so that Voyager Story. So this means that it's like really flexible for customizing your 3D edition, and you don't have to have like an excessive amount of technical expertise. You don't even have to have that much knowledge of like 3D. So within Voyager Story, you get a dynamic preview of what the final experience for the end user will be. This is called the Explorer window, and it's what you see in the green box here. And all of the panels surrounding the Explorer window will allow you to create and edit the model, the annotations, the articles, and the tours. And yeah, the Story interface is not nearly as complex as 3D modeling software like Blender or 3ds Max or Cinema 4D. It's also not a completely transparent tool. So especially for these users who have little experience with 3D. And because many of our project partners are inheriting 3D models, like they're not the ones creating the 3D model, they are kind of getting them from somebody who does that modeling for them. It was really important for us to ensure that these authors could create their edition using Voyager without too much help from our team. And to facilitate this, I developed a very meticulous step-by-step tutorial with a color coding schema that helps our edition creators like quickly and intuitively get the hang of the interface so that they're equipped with all of the possibilities that they could have in Voyager, as well as like this base level of confidence to create an experiment in Voyager for themselves. So Voyager is only a 3D viewing framework. It's not a self-standing platform in and of itself. So in that sense, it requires hosting and storage servers and a content management system to save the edition. So this graphic outlines our integration of Voyager into the authoring side of the infrastructure. So from the author user's perspective, they log in as an authenticated user to the app, and then via the app, the author creates an edition in which a Voyager scene is generated, and this Voyager scene kind of pops up in a new tab or window. And then in this Voyager story workspace, they can start to craft their edition and upload their 3D content. And then when they save in Voyager, all of their changes are saved and recorded in our backend database in PURE3D. So the web app is kind of like the connection between Voyager and the database. And so right now, these are the two different sides of PURE3D. One is editions.pure3d.eu and the other is author.pure3d.eu. So editions is the publication platform for 3D scholarly editions. So that's what our general public would go to. And author is where the creation and editing process occurs. So this is where edition author will work mostly. And these two sites are linked, but they operate like a bit independently from each other. So for example, an edition lives on the author side until it is published. Then when it's published, it gets pushed to the editions site. And when that happens, it doesn't like disappear from the author side, but it is no longer editable. It kind of gets frozen. However, that doesn't mean that once you publish, like that's it and you can't make any changes. You can, when necessary, unpublish your edition from the public side. And then when this happens, the edition becomes unfrozen in author, and then you can make changes again to Voyager and make changes to the metadata descriptions. And then when you're kind of done and you've made the revisions that you want to make, you can republish, and then it goes back into the edition side. So that was my description of the infrastructure. I hope it was clear. Now I want to go over the different aspects of that infrastructure from the perspective of the author's editorial workflow. It looks basically like this. This is a basic representation of that journey we've kind of come up with for the course of 4 years for edition authors to take when they decide they want to create a 3D edition using our PURE3D infrastructure. So the first step is for the person to get access to the infrastructure. This isn't quite as intuitive as just creating a login. If the author is a member of an institution, usually in Europe or usually European, they are generally able to log in via their institutional credentials. But some cases we've had authors who don't have that institutional login. So what we have for them is they can set up a Clarin account, and this has worked relatively well. So once a user successfully logs in, the system assigns them a general role. This can be owner, administrator, user, or guest, and authors are always by default assigned as a user. And this is viewed under the My Details section of the My Work tab, so that kind of top one. And then as an admin, I see that there is a new user in the system, and I create a project and assign this new user to the project as an organizer. And then now, once they've been assigned a project, they will see it in their My Projects and Editions kind of portion of that page. I can also designate the other special roles. So the organizer is at the project level, and as an organizer, you're allowed to make an edition, and that's this kind of second level here. And as an edition, what your role is, you can either be an editor or a reviewer. So the difference between the two, editor and reviewer, is an editor can make changes to Voyager and the metadata. But if they're a reviewer, then they don't have that right. They don't have the edit capability. They just have the viewing capability. So they can see the Voyager edition from the Explorer view, and they're not allowed to open up Story and make changes to somebody's edition. And then after they have access, the next step we have them follow is kind of this relatively quick and easy training phase. So as mentioned above, we focused a lot on the support and training throughout the edition making process. So the first thing we do is we have the authors know what it is that they're creating, which is what is a 3D edition. And the second thing is how to use Voyager. So generally, we start this kind of training phase with a presentation on the project on PURE3D and the concept of a 3D scholarly edition. Next, we have them do an exercise in which they experience 3D editions as implemented in Voyager. And this is really useful because it introduces them to the Voyager interface from the end user perspective, and also starts to give them some ideas on how Voyager operates using the annotations, the articles, and the tours in and around the 3D model. We then provide them with a training tutorial that they complete in a PURE3D workspace that I set up for them. So these training materials I've made available on our project website on pure3d.eu. It includes like this very long detailed document for basic and advanced versions of the tutorial. We also had a student assistant create some YouTube videos on how to use Voyager from a more like agnostic perspective. Like, you know, this is how you create an article, and this is how you edit the article, and this is how you know, make the tours, and here are some advanced things. So I think they're quite useful if you are by yourself and you want to get to know what Voyager can do. And we acknowledge that the software is in constant development, and we've been kind of signposted that things may look different in the near or distant future, especially with regard to like the interface or how things work. And our aim in investing in these materials was to provide as much knowledge on the application as possible without any in-person training, so that our authors are equipped and confident that they can use Voyager and all the features that it has to offer. And they can always return to the materials whenever they require, because yeah, you might learn something and then forget it when you have to go and do it in, you know, a few weeks or a month or two. So alongside the technical training on how to use Voyager, like how to use the Voyager software, we also focus a lot on helping the authors with their conceptualization of the 3D edition. So this is kind of where that create phase of the workflow steps in. What we have them do at the very beginning is an exercise with object-based annotation. We found that annotating objects in 3D is not quite as intuitive as you might imagine, especially for museum curators who are used to designing exhibitions and experiences without engaging too closely with like the really material aspects of a single object. It's especially difficult to do when the object is not as visually rich or has features on it, which or if it doesn't have features on it, which can tell the stories that you actually want to narrate. So you have to be a bit more creative with how you come up with these annotations or the experience in Voyager. So we start this process with a simple brainstorming session with their object. We ask them to use Miro or another project management app to start examining their objects or building or scene or whatever, and make note of points of interest that could then be annotated in Voyager. After this, we have them start thinking about what this physical visual feature can tell about the subject matter for their edition. So as they're doing this process, themes start to emerge that can be later grouped into tours that present a coherent and cohesive narrative. And then from here, we ask them to start doing some research and gathering multimedia that could be illustrative for the edition. So then all of these references and media sources, we have them kind of do the next stage of conceptualization, which is to map the sources out across the different tours of the edition. So this graphic was made by me for the very first 3D Scholarly edition we created with some students. There were 3 students, and they each were responsible for one tour of the edition. And as they were going through it, I noticed that they weren't really like talking to each other, because I could see that they were reusing multimedia in like every tour. And I thought this wouldn't, you know, this wasn't like a good approach for the edition, and that each media resource shouldn't be replicated again and again. And the media resource should really complement what is the topic of the article. I also thought that it would be a good way to visualize like how are the annotations being dispersed throughout the tour, how are different multimedia being dispersed. So if there's 3D models embedded in the article or audio files we had. And I kind of thought that it would be good to see this in a big picture and to not see that there's one tour that has all of the interaction with the 3D model, all of the multimedia just in like one tour, and then the other tours are just kind of article with very little dynamism in that experience. So I thought this was really helpful for them to get kind of like a big overview outline of what is the edition and how are the different pieces kind of fitting together. And then the final kind of thing that we have them do, or our recommendation, is to write and finalize the different articles into a PowerPoint or slide in the order of their thematic tour. So we found that the PowerPoint format is really an ideal space that mimics what you could do or what you can include in an article in Voyager. So you have a title for the article, you have a short text, you have some media that helps to illustrate that text, and then you can also add captions to the media. And in this case, this author also included some notes about how she wanted the 3D space to be visualized during that tour step. So she's kind of, creating this like plan before she even gets into Voyager. And we thought that this was like useful to do at least for one tour to get the hang of it, because the article editor, like, it's not a really great place to just like sit and write your articles in that text editor. It's really better to like have it outside in the format that you're comfortable with, and then copy and paste it inside Voyager when you're ready. This saves quite a lot of like frustration or issues with saving. So once like they've done some amount of that edition prep work, some of that conceptualization, the author can, start to do their implementation and experimentation in Voyager, like as served by PURE3D. So to do this, they go to their project that was assigned to them by the admin, and they click on, and then they create an edition, and then they have to scroll down, and then they click on this button called New. And what happens is the web app creates a Voyager scene file and a Voyager specific JSON format. So it's like svx.json. And then this is stored under that user's edition and their project and their profile. And when that Voyager scene is generated, the user is kind of redirected to a different tab or a different window where there's an empty Voyager story workspace. So something like this. And now the author can add their 3D model to Voyager. They can make adjustments to the position, the scale, the rotation. They can also edit and adjust the 3D environment, so the lights, the background, the camera, and some other things. They can also start to add their annotation onto the model. They can create articles and then start to bring everything together into a tour or multiple tours. And each time they save the workspace, the changes are updated in the JSON file that's stored back in PURE3D. And it's not just the JSON file that's stored in PURE3D, that also is saving the JSON together with the 3D files themselves. The articles are stored as HTML file formats. If you add like images or audio to the Voyager scene, these are also kind of pulled and stored into like a project folder for that edition. So at this stage, they've finished their edition to the best that they think it's ready. And then they hand it over to PURE3D to implement a review. The review can be like one of two things. For those who don't want or require that the edition be recognized as like a robust scholarly output, maybe they just want it as like a experience for museum visitors. They can just have like an internal review and inputs and feedback from our PURE3D staff. And then with that feedback, they can proceed to their publication stage. However, for those who do have an interest in undertaking a peer review for their edition, we do have a procedure developed by the that PURE3D sister project. And that process is, so once the first version of the project is complete, it undergoes the first round of peer review by 2 experts, in which the reviewers have the option to be open or remain anonymous. Here's also the option for open collaboration. And then if a reviewer has any specific expertise and would like to further assist with the 3D scholarly edition, the reviewer and the author can kind of opt to collaborate going forward with the, second revision. And the reviewer would then be credited as like a project collaborator. So the Opera project conducted focus group, survey, and interviews with 3D scholars, and the project identified 3 major themes from their responses. Firstly, that the opinions on peer review as a system and academia are varied, and it needs to be kind of reevaluated when we use this in 3D scholarship. The second theme was that there is a great interest in having 3D research peer reviewed, but there are many challenges both for reviewers and authors. For example, the stability of the technology and the expertise of the reviewers. Thirdly, what's required are, so the third thing is what requirements are necessary to create a peer review system that can be easily adopted by both the authors and reviewers. So something that's like kind of familiar to the existing peer review structure for print articles. So in line with these qualitative feedback, we have begun implementing the technical requirements needed to facilitate that peer review within PURE3D. We have guidelines for reviewers on how to conduct a peer review, including a tutorial for interacting with, along with evaluation criteria that they should follow. And the submission guidelines for authors is also available with information on what they can expect if they choose to go with a peer review. And within the infrastructure, the reviewers are assigned roles. So again, what I mentioned, their role would be reviewer, and then therefore they can only view the edition before it gets published, but they cannot edit. And we are kind of doing this now, but we are connecting our infrastructure with open journal systems. So we're including persistent identifiers, so the DOI, and we're exploring right now the possibility of versioning. We're finally we're looking for people who would like to act as reviewers for future 3D scholarly editions. With a QR code, you can go to a short form, which will ask you for your subject expertise and familiarity with 3D. And then, our reviewers will be listed on our website. So after the review, after you get feedback from either the PURE3D and or peer reviewers, the author can make revisions to the edition. But because we don't really have there's no track changes function in Voyager, and that would make it really hard to see everything that has been updated or revised, we decided now that we're going to ask the authors to make a statement addressing the points of revision and where and how they changed the various elements of the edition. And if they didn't agree with a suggestion, that's fine. They can, kind of respond to that in the statement as well. And then, so when all parties are satisfied with the edition and it's ready to kind of, see the light of day outside of author PURE3D, they can finalize their edition for publication on, within author. And what they do is they need to fill out the project and edition descriptions. They can add PNG icons so that when it's on the website, it has a little visual description, as well as metadata for the edition. And we decided that the metadata, we did a lot of reiterations of the metadata and discussions, but in the end, we decided to just restrict it to metadata for the edition itself, and not for the individual 3D models. We felt like this kind of metadata, paradata would be better served in a repository that is stored together with the 3D models. So not necessarily here, but kind of here, but connected to something like another trusted repository such as Zenodo or DANS. So when the author publishes, they push this publish button and it moves to the editions side of PURE3D. This is what it looks like. So the project in edition gets an identifier and a corresponding URL link. And this link remains the same even if the edition is temporarily unpublished and republished again. So if you publish and then realize you made a mistake or you want to fix something, you can unpublish, fix it, and go back. And the URL link will not change. It won't be updated. So that kind of URL link is reserved for your specific edition. The site also auto-generates a citation reference, and soon it will, when we figure it out how to do it, we'll generate a DOI for the edition, a DOI. And then if the edition has been peer reviewed, it will get kind of like a peer review seal and an indication of what kind of peer review has been done. And then from here, yeah, the edition can be shared widely and cited as any other scholarly input, or so we hope. And this concludes the workflow, the authoring workflow of 3D scholarly editions in PURE3D. And yeah, so the project is over. So what's next? My colleagues, or Costas, has already got funding for 2 other projects related to this. The first is Dynamic 3D, and it's funded by the eScience Center. And the goal of Dynamic 3D is to work with the Voyager developers to extend Voyager's capabilities for tools that can account for real-time simulation, exploring different variables and hypotheses, and visualizing uncertainties. So Voyager is like really great as a storytelling and narrative web viewing framework, but it doesn't have kind of these other things that as 3D researchers we're really itching to have in a 3D viewer. There's ways to kind of like hack what Voyager can do in order to replicate that, but to have these other things would be really beneficial for our work. So we're gonna work on that in the Dynamic 3D. The second project that has received funding is called Paradata in 3D Scholarship. This is funded by the Lorentz Center of the eScience Center in the Netherlands, and it's to enhance the intellectual transparency and scholarly argumentation within 3D heritage by focusing on development and implementation of Paradata standards. So yeah, this kind of what is 3D Paradata, and we're going to have like a workshop in September that focuses on that. We're gathering a bunch of experts to help decide that. Or at least contribute to the conversation about 3D Paradata. And then the last thing is, yeah, PURE3D 2.0. Currently, we're looking for funding opportunities to further develop and improve the PURE3D infrastructure. We're quite happy with how it turned out at the end of the project, but there are some things we really wish to change or revise or add to improve the infrastructure and by extent this kind of authorial creation workflow. So among the various things of our wish list, we would include something for 3D rights management that's built into the system. We also want to have more clear and transparent preservation protocols. We also want to pay more attention to like the sustainability of the infrastructure itself and maybe explore funding modules so that our project or the PURE3D platform is not reliant on different funding rounds. As well as we really want to improve the UX UI experience for both sides of the infrastructure, but mostly for the author side because it has absolutely no UX UI. We'd also want to add like advanced search filters for the edition side, as well as some aspects of community engagement. We're also interested in building and fostering more like further our PURE3D reviewer base. So if any of you are interested in becoming a reviewer, then you can send an inquiry via our website. And that's it. That's all I have to say for today. We can do the questions, and then maybe after questions, we can go to this Miro board together for you guys to play around with some additions. And I have some prompts also in the Miro board if you feel like writing some notes down in these little sticky notes related to that, feel free. And then after maybe like 20 minutes or so of like your exploration, we can have a discussion together back in the plenary. And if you want to, I don't know how we want to structure it, but either if you want to explore them by yourself or if you want to explore them together with a partner, like in a breakout room, that might be nice to kind of have like some open discussion about what you're seeing. But I leave that up to Louise to facilitate. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. I mean, from my experience, because I was part of one of the first calls, I had a lot of fun. So it was really great, and it was a different view of how to work with 3D, especially curating the tour was something I didn't really think about before. So yeah, I learned a lot, but questions from the audience first. Yes, please.
I was just wondering about, well, first of all, thank you for a great tour, and it looks highly interesting as a tool, definitely. But I was just kind of wondering about the concern of formats becoming outdated. This seems to happen so quickly that we are we kind of seem to run into this problem every time we digitize something. That certainly we can't use it anymore. So what are the thoughts about this?
Oh, yeah, we have thought about it. So Voyager only accepts like the JLB or JLTF file format, which I find it to be very nice because it kind of encapsulates a lot of different things in one file format. You can have like your textures embedded to it, also animation or lights or anything's related to the scene. So we kind of had to use the JLB, JLTF format for this project, but we do recognize like file formats going obsolete very quickly. And we haven't really addressed that in our infrastructure yet. I think that would be in like kind of the next phase. And what I envision is that it's following something similar to what the dynamic collections infrastructure does. And what they do is they have a link to Zenodo. And in Zenodo, they have the 3D files stored. And I think what you could do, I'm not sure exactly what they do. You can have it in, JLB. So you have that file format. You have OBJ with the JPEG texture, and then maybe any other ones. And I think ideally, as technology progresses, there will be something that we can always return back to. And if not, I think another thing that they do, which I think is a good idea, at least for digitization, models created through digitization, you can include the original JPEG images that created that model. I think this is also good not only just for preservation or for accommodating, when things become broken or obsolete, but if like technology improves and photogrammetry, like processing and the algorithms get like better and better, we're already seeing this right now. You can kind of reprocess an image data set to recreate that 3D model. And maybe it's better than the original 3D model using, your original data set. So I think that kind of is where the preservation side is acting, and ours is more about like the publication, but we really need to figure out a way to make that more clear and transparent link between preservation of 3D files and data and also the edition themselves, because the whole edition is coded in a very specific for a very specific 3D viewer, which is Voyager. I think JSON is a good file format for that experience, but who knows what will happen in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Martin?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think this is a very important discussion. What do we keep and how do we keep it?
Yeah.
Because we are producing more and more of this 3D file formats. I think first, I'm not sure how I'm not practicing 3D digitization, so I don't have the big storage systems in my vicinity. I think for reproducibility, for reproducing the results, it would be very good to keep the JPEGs anyway. So not only for preservation, but also if you want to say anything scientific or research based on a 3D model, you should have somewhere the JPEGs that somebody can reproduce the results. But I'm not sure if that's feasible from the data storage requirements. I'm not sure how many JPEGs you have before you start making the 3D models. And the other thing with the format, I think it should be always transparent. Like, and I get it that most 3D formats used now are kind of not binary, but you can read them.
Mhm.
And you should have a transparent documentation of them somewhere. I think that's at least that should be possible, that somebody in 50 years can just take, the numbers or the bits and say, so now I'm reproducing it. But I'm not sure if this discussion is already through in the 3D community. And who does this discussion? I know there's a IIIF 3D working group. I'm not sure how they try to define standards for preservation, but I think that is a very important question.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also a question that we need to consider with sustainability in mind. Like, it doesn't cost nothing to our pocketbooks or to our environment to, just dump a bunch of data into servers. So I think you're right. There needs to be the JPEGs preserved, but maybe not in the really high resolution gigabyte raw version of it. I think there needs to be kind of a selection of what do you choose to preserve and a kind of very meaningful manner. So not just to I have all of this stuff that I produced for this project and I'm just going to dump it all in there and forget about it. And somebody's going to have to deal with it and unpack it, in 50 years time. But we have to kind of make some curatorial choices about what gets saved and what doesn't get saved in a repository or in a external hard drive. But yeah, it is an issue. I think some things that you're talking about maybe will be addressed in this workshop on 3D pair data that Costas is working on in the coming months. But you're right also that IIIF 3D working group are thinking about these things as well. I don't know exactly where they're at with their decisions on standards. I should probably poke my head in there and see. But yeah.
That reminded me that part of it with the JPEGs does work if you digitize an object, but if you build something
from
just
scratch,
from scratch with resources, I mean, sure, you have the where you got all your data from, but there's no JPEGs you can save. So
yeah, I think it could be that model is lost. Then I think I read somewhere that we should make screenshots of what we did, or I'm exploring I'm doing my own 3D reconstruction project now, and I'm thinking about how to document my process. And I found another project did that really well for a Roman fort. And they had each element of their fort had kind of a dossier. And the dossier had kind of a schematic drawing of their reconstruction. It included all of their descriptions about how they made it, this tower for this fort. It had the references, it had the texture material and justification for why they did certain decisions. So I thought that was really elegant, to at least kind of break it up into the bits and pieces and not just talk about it as a whole, because as a whole, you kind of will lose something. So maybe that's a good way to do it, is for 3D reconstructed projects, is to break it down into, okay, this is, the fort wall, this is the fort gate, this is the fort tower, and then kind of dissect it like that. And maybe that's kind of a way of replicating a bit that JPEG preservation.
Like creating your own architectural plans for something you build in 3D. And I mean, it also helps with
so you could have
at the end, if you build your edition and you need to make a tour, then you have all the material already there from your documentation, which you built yourself.
And I guess with the articles, at least they're saved as HTML files, which I hope will be a very stable, hopefully in 50 years we'll be able to read HTML files. Another idea that I've read was that the platform itself should be able to, when somebody says, I want to download this 3D model or this project, the the downloader can kind of automatically convert to a specific 3D file format. I know Sketchfab does that. I think it's nice. That could also be an option, is, you know, some kind of future protocol that I think that's what it is. I think in the future they will need some system that can actually convert older obsolete files that are maybe widely used, like the OBJ file or the JLTF or Poly, the PLY one. But yeah, I think we have a lot of different options. I think we need to be creative about how we structure that, though.
Are there any more questions? So maybe we can look at an edition together.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe that's easier because we're not so many people. And if there's anything else someone wants to ask, just unmute.
Yeah, I was debating if I can, I should like walk you through both sides. So yeah, this is that editions.pure3d. So this is what you will see. Right now it has very minimal tabs. The one for 3D editions shows all of the 3D editions that we have published. And that includes, yeah, all of these toys, mostly toys. And this is to kind of get a big overview of the editions. And then we have something called projects, which is where the editions are sitting. And for example, all of the toys are sitting in the project called Toys with Voice. And then we decided to put in all of the editions from Louise's cohort as this project called the First Call for Projects. But initially we wanted to have we had the idea for 3D projects and not just 3D editions, because we imagined that a project would make up multiple editions. So for example, this project, Modern Art in 3D, when you click on it, you see that there are 4 objects that were digitized and created editions around these objects. So in this sense, it was like, that was the concept. And then once you click on one of the editions, you have like the description of that edition itself, as well as the metadata for the edition, and then the edition itself in Voyager, and you can expand it to get a bigger like view.
So
Yeah.
would this also be done now? So if like an institution wanted to publish editions, but they were like from the same
Yeah, I think
person,
so. I think
could create a project.
Yeah, I think what we wanted to avoid was that it was one edition for one project. So for example, this one, it only really talks about one edition, and he's not going to make more. So then we were thinking like, well, is there a way we can group you know, solo projects or solo editions under one project? And that's what we were thinking for this one. So then this would kind of be like if you want to think of it in like journal ways, it would kind of be like a special edition for the journal, or a call for projects on a theme, so that they can operate by themselves, but they can kind of be contextualized into, you know, why were these editions created in general. But yeah, I think for an institution who wanted to have their own project, like this Modern Art in 3D one from the Van Bommel Van Dam Museum, then if they're going to create more than one edition, then I think they would get their own kind of project grouping. I don't know.
Okay. And I just remembered a question I wanted to ask. If you're an author and you create an edition, is there any way that multiple people
Mhm.
can edit, or
Yeah.
is it like one person is the editor?
Okay. I have two answers to that question. And it is yes, multiple people can work on an edition. I can show you that. I can show you with the Codex Cospi, I think. Sorry, as the admin, I have access to all of the editions. Here we go. So for the Codex Cospi, we had she had a co-collaborator. So you can see that right now, the editors for the edition is Alice. She created it. I'm also an editor so that I can like go in and publish or do things. But then there are a number of reviewers. And one of her reviewers was actually her co-author. This is like Silvio Peroni. We made him a reviewer because he didn't get training in Voyager, but he's like a co-author for the edition. So he goes in and he can see it, but he can't kind of accidentally open Voyager and make changes that Alice hadn't like kind of, I don't know, authorized in a way. So he's more like a conceptual author, and she's both a conceptual author as well as like a Voyager technical author. So I think that's a good way to co-author, but you can also have co-authors who do have the writing, who have the editor role. But I will say that you cannot, or you should not, edit Voyager together at the same time simultaneously. You can, if you are doing it in a co-authoring way and both authors are technical people with Voyager, then they cannot, they should not edit at the same time, because when you save the Voyager workspace, it'll overwrite what somebody else has if they have that open. So they kind of have to coordinate, say, oh, I'm going to work on it from this day to that day or this hour to that hour. And then I'm going to like confirm with you that I've saved and closed the Voyager story workspace. And then you can open and edit yourself. We actually are going to have that problem with the students right now because they are working as a pairs and they both are going to be getting their hands involved in Voyager. So as you can see, like for this Totoro project, yeah, I'm an editor as like an admin, and Pietro as well, and Vicky as well. So they both have that right, but they have to coordinate within amongst themselves who edits Voyager at which time.
I mean, yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yes. And you add new editors via this little icon that doesn't really make sense. And you have to select who it is, and then you find the person who's
But
there.
would you do that, or like
I have to do
someone from the team, or
yeah.
is it as an editor you can invite other people?
That's a good question. My experience is I'm like the super admin, so I can do whatever I want. But I know that the like, so for here, this dark bold, like 00 Voyager, this is the project, and I am the organizer of the project. And let's say Louise was the organizer of this project. She's not an admin, she's just an organizer. She can assign editors for the edition. So the role of the organizer of a project is that they can create editions and assign users to that edition, and then you can like change their role if you want, or remove them, I guess. So yeah, this should be kind of this management of user roles, both for admin as well as like people who are organizer or editors. I'm not sure an editor of an edition has the right to add another editor of edition. It might be that that role only belongs to the organizer.
When you don't want to like openly publish or have a peer review, you can still use the infrastructure to create editions for like internal use. Was that correct?
Yes. I think we would prefer that, like, if you're using our platform, eventually you want to publish, but that, yeah, you could do that theoretically. But
I
yeah,
mean, I mean, you can just use Voyager as it in itself, so you
yeah,
wouldn't really need to use the PURE3D infrastructure.
right, exactly.
It makes
And
more sense to
yeah,
use it to publish.
exactly. So you could use Voyager standalone. Which I did also want to show you. So Voyager standalone is anybody can come here. It's basically like Voyager without any content management system in the background. So you see there's no save button because there's nowhere to save it to. But you can drag and drop a 3D model into the space and play around with Voyager and start to get to know the interface. And you can do this to see if this is something that you would like to pursue further. I would encourage people who are interested in, yeah, getting their hands on Voyager to see how their own 3D models look, to go to the standalone. And if you have a good idea for like a 3D edition and you would like to do one, I think you can contact us. Our project is ended, so we don't have any like funding to do really intense like training or mentoring. But I think if you're interested and you have a good idea, I think we would be happy to open up a workspace for you in Voyager and to let you do the training and kind of go through the conceptualization. We can have like pop-in conversations as you go if that's what you want. And then you can do the peer review process if you choose or not. But essentially, yeah, I think we as the PURE3D, like if we are publishing something on our platform, we want to make sure that what's being published on our platform is of good quality. And so it's not kind of like a Sketchfab thing where people can publish whatever they want, whenever they want. They don't necessarily have that freedom. I guess that was the point of PURE3D.
And is there like a limit? So you have to have articles and tours, or can you just publish the model
I
with
think it's
some annotations?
I think the answer to that question depends on how you want to use it. So for some of our editions, there's only like one tour, because the way they want to use it is for a museum experience. And I think in that setting for the public, it doesn't really serve to create like 3 really intense tours. But if you have like if you have a lot to say, if you have a lot of different narrative themes, or if you're really scholarly and rigorous about your documentation and you want to put that into a 3D scholarly edition, that's also okay. I think like bare minimum, I would say one tour with a decent amount of articles, like about 5 to 8 articles. And again, if you just want to use it because you want to be able to add contextualization to a 3D asset or a 3D model that you have, then I would say that that's fair game. It kind of has to have some like argument or value, not argument, but just like you should be able to say something nice about the 3D model using that 3D model. Yeah, so the Codex Cospi one, I think there's there's 3 tours, 2 tours. But the one yeah, there are a few others that just have the one. I think it's the Modern Art in 3D. Each of these only have one tour. But I think they're very nice tours and they kind of say everything that the museum wants to say about the object. So yeah, I don't know if we want to take a break or go into the Miro thing or just skip it and have a discussion. I don't know. I see some people are already in the mural. Oh, Louise, you're on mute still.
Yeah, we only have like around 10 more minutes officially.
Oh, okay.
So, does anyone have any more questions? And if not, I urge everyone to go and look at the editions because it's pretty cool, especially the tours and how they work and what you can actually do with 3D and
Yeah,
these 3D editions to really curate
Yeah.
the 3D object and tell the story with it.
yeah. What I really like about my work, especially with Voyager, is that I'm always learning new things with Voyager. Like it's not a viewing framework that you can do, 5 things and then that's it. You've exhausted your possibilities. There's the flexibility of what you can do is it's not infinite, but it's really there's a lot of different things you can configure and I'm getting inspired by other people's experimentation in Voyager and how they use it. And so in my perspective, the addition is not like we don't want an addition to be one formula and like this is how you should use 3D together with your information. What we're also finding is that people can be really creative with how they use the 3D affordances to like kind of reflect what they're talking about in their articles in the text. So Louise's edition, I liked how she mimicked like photogrammetry by bouncing around her like 3D digitized object to show like this is how I, created the pictures with our students because they're also digitizing, but they're using light boxes. One of them, so they did the digitization where the object was standing upright and they turned him upside down. And so they mimic that in Voyager. They like flipped the object upside down to show that they also, did a 360. I think they could also, because they use a turntable, they could also mimic the rotations that were taken with a turntable. So I think it's really nice to see creativity and how you do storytelling with 3D. And I think this is something that we're just kind of tapping into right now. There's no other, I don't know, there's not a lot of literature on like how do you use 3D to do storytelling. So I find that really exciting.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, that you can use the infrastructure and the presentation for not only like research questions or very heavy research of 3D objects and new results, but you can also use it as a visualization tool for the open public to bring them 3D objects, a digitization and all that stuff. Like show them how to actually digitize and do all the work.
Yeah, and if you feel limited by only your single 3D object that you have, we've kind of opened up the box and okay, well, add in other things to the 3D scene, like add in pictures, add in maps, add in like other 3D models that can just pop up during one step of a tour that really helps to, make your argument rich. So in that sense, again, it's like when you introduce 3D and like the ability to pop in and out of different models or to do different things with them, how somebody structures their narrative is just like the only bound is their creativity, in my opinion.